Well, Apple earnings came in below expectations. Joining us now to help break down the numbers, Angelo Zino, senior equity analyst with CFRA Research, joins us now. So, Angelo, what do you make of the headlines here from Apple?
So, initially, definitely a disappointment when we start looking at it from a top and bottom line perspective. It was clearly a miss. But at the end of the day, I think it's one of those things where clearly the stock was running into these numbers anyway. But, when we're thinking about Apple and the overall quarter, I do think you have to put it somewhat into context, right? And you start thinking about what's gone on in the December quarter. We were talking about smartphone sales broadly down about 15 to 20%. Apple had a down 8% quarter in terms of iPhones. You're talking about Mac sale. You're talking about broader PC shipments down 25 to 30%. Apple was down 29% off of very difficult comps. I think that clearly the positives are what we saw on the iPad side of things, growing about 30% year over year because they had supply constraints a year ago. And then on the services side of things, I think that's really what the biggest positive was, growing about 6% year over year, a slight beat relative to our expectation.
So when you're talking as services for Apple, that's the App Store, all that kind of stuff, Angelo?
Yes, it is. It's App Store, the storage offerings, and their licensing business via Alphabet.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it is quite weak on the devices side, other than the iPad that you pointed out. So 9.4 billion versus 7.25 billion on iPad revenue, but Macs, iPhones quite a bit lower. Do you think that is because of the production issues or more of a demand thing?
So as far as the iPhone numbers are concerned, we do think it is more supply constraints out there. Again, down 8% year over year. Units were probably down north of 15% when you kind of try to back out some of the ASP increases. So definitely hurt, we think, by some of the supply constraints out there. And macro factors, of course, also impacting, I think, the iPhone numbers. When you think about the Mac side of things, down 29%. That's more of the extremely difficult comps that are out there. A year ago, they were rolling out some new devices with their internally designed M1 chip. They're now kind of having to digest some of those kind of inventory buildups out there. So it's a number that was weak. We'd expect some of these numbers to be weak again in the March quarter because of some of the macro pressures out there. I'd also say when you start thinking about the consumer in general right now, the consumer right now definitely spending a lot more money on experiences, right, relative to actual hardware products out there, which you saw a benefit during the pandemic on.
So in terms of the challenges ahead, you think it's more consumer related? I mean, Tim Cook talked about how production is now back where we want it to be. So from the supply side, things are smoothing out, but it's really coming down to the consumer from here?
Yeah, I'd say any pressures going forward, at least as we look into the March and June quarter, it is going to be more consumer driven. We are a bit below the street in terms of our expectation across some of their core hardware businesses. We're about 2 to 3% below the street, and likely our numbers may have to go even lower after these results. But I think the setup as we kind of go through the second half of the year becomes much more favorable. You're talking about starting to lap some very easy comparisons. You're going to lap some of those supply constraints that we just witnessed later this year. You're also talking about more favorable currency rates out there, which, again, the management team highlighted as a headwind in the December quarter. And then, overall, you're talking about, we think just a much more favorable landscape as you go through the second half.
Leading into this, Angelo, you were expecting some weakness on the services side of things because of the App Store. What was your concern there, I suppose? Does that really come down again to the health of the consumer, or is there something more there?
Yeah, so as far as the services side of things, I'd say it had a little bit to do with the macro and a little bit to do with the consumer, and some China effects too as well. So when you kind of think about what the issues really were, it was softness on on the advertising side of things, of course, and of course in terms of the gaming side of things. I mean, we just saw a company like EA post some of their numbers, but overall, some of the trends on the gaming side of things have been weak in the second half of the last year. again, it's something that we probably think will continue in the near term before starting to improve later this year.
Now, Apple hasn't been one of the tech companies that's done layoffs recently. Do you think that that could be in the cards for Apple?
Unlikely, to be honest with you. I mean, when you kind of think about how Apple has just performed, over the last several years, and even if you kind of go back to 2016, ever since then, on an annualized basis, they haven't increased their employee headcount by more than 7% in any of those years. You look at, during the pandemic, they only increased their workforce by about 20%, whereas kind of Microsoft and Alphabet increased by north of 50%, and then you're talking about Amazon and Meta increasing north of 80-90%. So there's a lot less to cut in terms of Apple side of things. And if you kind of think about how they make money, right, it's all about pushing greater content into higher average selling prices to the consumer, as well as making money on the services side of things. So I think there's just less for them to have to kind of trim, to be honest with you.
Angela, what do you think it could take for the demand for PCs to kind of come back? Because it's not just Apple. There's been a slump across the industry in terms of people needing computers because everybody got one during the pandemic, and I guess add in the inflation and just feeling a crunch to your budget as well. But is it going to come down to Apple coming out with something new and shiny that people want, or is it just going to take time?
Yeah, I think, listen, Apple just rolled out some new PCs on their side of things about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But when we start thinking about just the broader PC industry in general, I mean, clearly there was that benefit during the pandemic. And I mean, you saw PC sales, I think, grow north of 40% from pre-pandemic to kind of the peak. And you're now kind of back to pre-pandemic levels here. So we do think it starts to stabilize here. And at the end of the day, actually, when you think about the broader PC industry, you're talking about a much larger installed base. So it should benefit the company longer term. So we think over the next 2 to 3 quarters, you do start seeing some stabilization off of these current levels.